Hey, my name is Michelle Habell Palla, and I am a professor of gender, women, and sexuality studies at the University of Washington. And I'm also a member of a community music group that is part of Fandango practice.
Please describe UW Library's Women Who Rock, making scenes, building communities, and your role with the program.
Uh, University of Washington, Women Who Rock, Making Scenes, Building Communities, History Archive is an oral history archive that um, it hosts the life stories of people who have been in music scenes uh, that are using music to build community and social justice. And particularly, not just only in the Pacific Northwest, but also throughout the United States and outside of the United States, for instance, in Mexico or in even a place like Ecuador. So we're really trying to gather the stories of people who aren't necessarily stars in the commercial industry, but who are really making things happen in community music scenes. And what's special about this archive also is that it's a free archive accessible to anyone. You don't have to have a membership. It's hosted by the University of Washington Libraries, which is a public university. So as long as you have the link, you can click on it and you can go through the histories and you can watch the mini documentaries we have. And so anybody can from any site. There's no special access that you need. And we were really excited about being able to work with the University of Washington to make an archive that was community based and community accessible. Say my role in relation to the archive is I'm one of the co-directors with my colleague Sonnet Retman, who's also a professor at the University of Washington. But there are many people, community members, who are part of the larger Women Who Rock collective, which organizes a yearly what we call unconference, the Women Who Rock unconference, that actually helps to share the archive with the general public and also meet new people and hear new stories that then we can later share in the archive. And so what's important about this is that usually archives are um, behind a wall. You know, at the official archives are usually behind a wall. You have to have access for them, and also they tend to focus on maybe a single person, and they are not necessarily collectively built. So what's beautiful about this archive, which was the first archive that I know of in the United States that actually focused on women who were part of music scenes or women musicians, um, at in the larger sense, right? Not a particular papers of one person's. And in the time that we've built Women Who Rock, many different archives have come up. There's the Bikini Kill. Oh, who's the lead singer of Bikini Kill? Kathleen Hanna. Her papers are at I believe NYU in their archive, even though she's from the Pacific Northwest. So but again, I think all of these archives are important because women and femme bodies and their allies tend to be written out of the chronologies of rock history as we know it, or the chronologies of community histories as we know it.
Why is it important for young people to be involved in Women Who Rock?
We are so excited to have young people involved in both building the Women Who Rock archive, which again is a special collections of the University of Washington libraries. They can get experience if they like learning how to be part of a special collection or learning how to become a media producer that's going to help film the oral histories that will then later be archived. And in doing that, they'll learn about metadata, which is basically information about data that has to go with each each interview, that then allows somebody like you or me to type in a name and have that interview pop up. Also, we're excited about young students or young people, not just students, but just young people in general, and people of all ages, being part of the yearly community unconference and getting involved and yes, learning skills and sharing their skills and just having the opportunity to connect with people from across art scenes and music scenes that they might never have a chance to do so, and activist scenes. And so I remember one, for instance, one a couple years ago, our Women Who Rock Unconference theme, which we held at Washington Hall, was focused around the what was it, the Dakota pipeline, the No Dakota pipeline. So we had speakers that were talking about what was important for the pipeline, how the pipeline was going to really be detrimental to tribal communities that that pipeline ran through, but not just tribal communities, but for everyone, right? Because it affects the entire environment. We had people from local organizers who were part of the No New Youth Jail campaign. And so we also had hip hop artists, right? Local hip hop artists, and that just skill shared about hip hop. So um, we have a lot of everything that students can connect to, and it's just what, young people, doesn't necessarily have to be students, but that people can connect in with. We also had people doing skill shares on environmental justice, or in terms of sharing recipes, right? Last year we had our theme was we had to pivot online, and it was called Ofrendas for the Future. And young people involved got to meet a very um, well-known healer from East Los Angeles named Ophelia Esparza, who happens to be a National Endowment for the Arts fellow. And she talked about the importance of what does it mean to be part of that ofrenda tradition that remembers those who have passed, um, but also helps to remember those resilience practices that have gotten us all here up to this point and as we move into the future. So I think it's also a way for young people, just again, to connect with people they may not otherwise have a chance to. It's intergenerational. So there's babies to grandmothers involved. Everybody rocks everybody rocks the archive, like I said, like from babies rocking the cradle to grandmothers rocking the rocking chair, right? So we rock in many ways. We rock the mic. And I just want to say also, when we talk about women, we're not talking about we're not exclusive to thinking about only people who were born with in a particular with particular body parts. We're really thinking about femme bodies, or bodies that are feminized, right? And their allies, right? We have lots of allies that are not necessarily women or femme, that understand the importance um, of this, of this archive, and of the unconference, and really the importance also of women of color to the story of hip hop and rock in the United States that hasn't really been told, or that gets told but isn't necessarily uh, archived in the way we'd like to see it archived and shared.
How did your social justice journey begin?
I was the eldest daughter of a family of three girls. And my dad was very old school Catholic. And so he would say this to me when I was a little kid: well, if you were a boy, I would let you do that. Or if you were a boy, I would let you do this. But because you're a girl, I'm not going to let you. So I would get so mad as a kid, as a young child. And I just thought that was so unfair and just not right, that I think that that's where those seeds were planted. So, I and then in high school, well, I grew up in a town, I have to say, that at the time was a majority white town, and we had moved in. This is Southern California in the 1970s. So my father's from Indiana, and my mom's from Los Angeles. My grandmother's from Mexico, and so it was a quote unquote mixed marriage when my parents got married. So there was always this question about the children. How will the children know who they are, right? And so to me, it was always, what a ridiculous question. But they were married in the 60s, and so back then and I mean, look at what we just witnessed last night with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, right? These mixed marriages and the concern about the offspring. It's still as relevant as it was in 1966, right? So I think that and then moving to a town from East LA to a town called Downey, where a band called the Carpenters were from, and you may not know them, but if you look them up, Google them, people, they were popular in the 1980s, but they are kind of a quintessential Southern California easy living band, a brother and a sister, and Karen Carpenter, who was a lead singer, actually had a very difficult life in the end, but they kind of represent that white bread sensibility of Southern California. So I grew up in that with teachers from K through 12, with teachers who were not happy about the changing demographic of their city, and neither were some of the kids. And I remember being little, like in elementary school, and then all the way up into high school, where other kids would say, "Go back to Mexico, wetback," like, "What are you doing here?" And so I'd be like, "What are you talking about? I don't have any family. All my family's here." Or like, "Why would I go back? Go back where?" So like, I didn't really understand as a kid. So all my family was in the Southern California. I mean, all my Mexican American family. So I had to learn to uh, defend my presence, and that I should be there, and actually that, yeah, I had every right to be there, you know, and in fact, we didn't cross the border crossed us, right? So all that history that I had to learn, but I just remember as a kid. So that really, whether I wanted or not to be in part, be having to be part of social justice movements, I was already dealing with the social justice issues, and and so I turned to music as a young person, especially in high school, middle school and high school, because that's where I found um, a conversation that spoke about inequality, talked about changing the world, that had a place of freedom for women, or young women. And so I turned to punk because it was uh, one of the places where this conversation about racism was reflected back to me, and that this, wanting to change the status quo, that's all about. That was punk I knew back in the day, right? And so also I would listen to these records, these ska records from Great Britain by this label called Two Tone. So there were these records that were coming out at the time in the 80s from the Two Tone, which was it was an anti-fascist kind of record label that was against anti-immigration in Great Britain at the time, because in the 70s and 80s there was a lot of um, uh, nationalism that was used against immigrants from the Caribbean to Great Britain. And so there was this cool record label called Two Tone. Google it, everybody. And there would just be a lot of songs like, if you have a racist friend, now it's time for your friendship to end. And so, and you could dance to it, right? So that was really my political awakening, and that kind of for me to understand the connection between music and transformations of social justice. And then so when I went to college, I um I was a DJ for the local radio station, and I just kept this interest. And then when I went to graduate school, I ended up being able to focus on this interest. And then I my PhDs in literature with a focus on Chicana culture and feminism. And so then I was hired here at the University of Washington almost over 20 years ago to teach and write about this. And so yeah, I should have my props, my book that came out like a couple just recently called American Sabor, US Latinos and Popular Music, which we created with the Smithsonian Institution and the Mopop Museum here. And so that was really an important exhibit that was bilingual and that told the story of how okay, so if we think about what's the history of rock and roll? Usually I ask people that, "Hey people, what's the history of rock and roll?" And usually they'll come back with this answer. Well, rock and roll is the it happened when country and western got together with the blues and had a baby named rock and roll, right? And so we say yes, that is part of the story but not the whole story. Also at that party were the instruments and the rhythms brought to the party by Mexican Americans or Chicanos or Puerto Ricans, Cubanos living in the United Tejanos, like living in the United States, born in the United States, who brought those rhythms and those instruments to the party. And that is the sound of American rock and roll, right? Quote unquote American rock and roll. So that's the story that we tell. And you can Google American Sabor, US Latinos and American music, American pop music, and you'll find more information out there. So that is really just a long way of saying that my early interest in social justice and music ended up informing that exhibit, what I teach, how I live my life today as part of a music community group that is that gives free well did before COVID free workshops every Saturday at El Centro, and we plan to when the pandemic ends. And we share a tradition that I learned about in this project called the Fandango tradition, which is focused around Son Jarocho um, music and tarima or percussive dance on a tarima. And that's part of a larger musical social movement that comes from Veracruz, Mexico, but has spread throughout Mexico and New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle. And so yeah, so I mean, I think for students, young people to understand that social justice, we might have one vision of what that activism looks like, but it's actually so broad what you can do to be part of a social justice conversation that involves your own love. For me, my love that was for music, but for others it could be art, for others it's dance, right? And so for others it's museums or curation or it's food or whatever makes your heart sing, whatever makes your heart beat with excitement, you can, it's connected to a social justice issue. It's just how the world is. There's nothing that lies outside of that, that lays outside of that. So young people and any people, like once you understand what makes your heart sing, you can attach that to a community of people that I know is out there that you may not know right now is out there. But if you, put that energy out there, I know that you're going to find others like you who are going to, build community and help us little by little, drop by drop, create the world that we want to live in.
What are some of your proudest professional accomplishments?
I'm so lucky to be part of a community of people, both outside of the university and inside of the university, of people who are dedicated to the arts and creative work and social justice. And I think my proudest moments are when we do the community-based unconference, Women Who Rock Unconference, which we do host off a campus in the community, because uh, because it is such a rare place to have. I mean, it's very cross-cultural, right? There's people from different music scenes, all kinds of different music scenes, and from different communities that we meet in this one spot once a year to have this conversation. So that is one of my proudest moments to be part of. And again, I am most proud of my accomplishments when they are done in community with others. And so, for sure, Women Who Rock, both the Unconference and the archive, which is built collaboratively. And also, you know, my the American Sabor exhibit, that was really a highlight of my career because that again, it was really trying to focus on the community aspect that support uh, um, music across the United States. And, you know, the evidence that we had about the fact that US Latinos or Latinos in the US have that belong here, you know, that have been here, that you wouldn't have the culture that we have without us. For that to be made during a time when um, you were hearing on the news and you still on the news that people don't belong here, or that the echo of what I heard as a child, go back to Mexico, go back to wherever, you don't belong here, right? So that was so proud that we got to share that story, that well, if we left, you wouldn't have what you think you was yours, right? And so how that and how we've had musical conversations, um you know, across communities, uh, and that we've danced together and that we've made music together. That was, yeah, and to have the Smithsonian pick it up and for it to travel for 7 years, 7 years for that exhibit to travel, was incredible to me, to all over the United States and Puerto Rico, and some aspects, tiny aspects of it that went to Germany. And so I think that the stories we have to tell, all of us, um, are so important. But some of our stories aren't really shared or listened to. And that was a, you know, for me to be able to help create a platform where those community stories could be shared and listened to, and to reflect back to people who helped make those stories, that really was the proudest moment of my career. I remember going to the exhibits, for instance, when it opened in Los Angeles, and seeing some of the musicians who were creating music from East LA from the 1960s, and just go there and reminisce, and whole families would reminisce and share music, and that was beautiful. I mean, I have written another, you know, a couple books, published a couple books. Another book was called Locomotion. My first book, The Travels of Chicana Latina Popular Culture. That was also a very proud moment, especially since I'm the first person in my family to get a PhD, to become a professor, any of that.
How has the Women Who Rock program sustained through COVID 19?
We ended up building a beautiful online archive with Doña Feria, having her do Zoom workshops. And then we actually had we produced basically a live um, unconference conversation. It was just a panel conversation, and then people could log in. And so I can give you the link, or you know, I don't know how to get the information to people, but if you Google "Women Who Rock" and women with an X, "Women Who Rock 2020 Ofrendas for the Future," the beautiful online ofrenda will pop up, and you can scroll through it. So yeah, and so what we're going to do this year again, we're going to have, since it's for year 11 and it has to be online again, we're going to do a countdown, basically a countdown of going over the themes of the last 10 years and just sharing like a funny story from each year. And that will just be an episode. It'll be a Zoom episode, you know, countdown, and to get ready for next year, when hopefully we will be able to meet in person and have an actual live unconference. But some of the themes over the years have been honey and healing, media justice, rock the archive, dance the archive, ofrendas for the future. So many, I can't remember all of them, but they're all. We also have a Women Who Rock unconference website that's different than the Women Who Rock archive. and you can look at all the posters there we have from the last 10 years. And I should say that you please Google UW Libraries Women Who Rock, and the archive will come up. And then if you just Google Women Who Rock Seattle, our unconference page will come up. So yeah, we've had to do everything online, but here's the takeaway. What was so amazing to us is that because we had built kind of this social infrastructure over the last 10 years, people knew that people came to expect that the unconference was going to happen, that we were, and because we have developed working relationships with people in local Seattle community and outside of Seattle, we were able to um, bring everybody together. And that's how we could pivot so fast, because we have built relationships. We've done so many projects together. We've done so many unconferences together. We work very closely with the Son Jarocho community. We that I'm part of, and so it was just beautiful to see everyone. Um, we just figured out how to do it. We had to improvise, but because there was already a lot of trust built there, we could just continue to move forward. Yeah, yeah. It was hard. That was a hard time, really hard moment. And the ofrendas for the future theme was really helpful for everyone. I think it kept us very grounded and a very terrifying moment, for everyone. So I'm grateful that we were able to do that.
What gives you hope for the future?
Wow. All the people that I do work with for Women Who Rock, and also, of course, as a professor, I teach a lot of first generation students, a lot of students who are coming to the university and meet this very strange monster, beautiful monster, terrible monster. It depends on what's happening, right? And help to see them really grow through that system and help them thrive, and yeah, deal with really difficult things, but also move forward, is really makes everything worth it for me. I'm also fortunate to work with to train graduate students, PhD students, first generation immigrant women of color, and it makes me so proud that they are now gone on and become professors themselves. They've gotten tenure. We've published together. We do community events together, and I think it's this. What gives me hope is seeing them take this on and do amazing things that I would never imagine doing. And so that the future, I can see it, right? In these dark times, I see it in young people who are moving us forward, right? It's all about the young people, right? Who are moving us forward. And I really am, again, so grateful to be part of a community, of a network of positive people who are really trying to uh, honor Mother Earth, La Pachamama, right? To help us rethink how we live in relation to the earth and to each other. I have incredible colleagues too, um, who are part of we have a department called, I think it's American Indian Studies, right? But it's more than just American Indian Studies, it's Indian Studies across the world. But to learn from my native colleagues and students and community members that Women Who Rock partners with, about the importance of recognizing those peoples who have stewarded the land long before uh, Europeans came, has been transformational, for students and for any of the projects I'm involved with. And it's, I see that it's difficult. It's been a difficult time, but we're moving forward, right? That there are people now who've been um, animated in a way And especially young people. I have a daughter who's a teenager, and her friends are just, they're not gonna let us live the way we lived before. They're really trying to uh, show us a new way of living that respects the earth and its resources, that respects other people, that shows us a world where many worlds are possible. That we it's not over till it's over, right? So we've still got a lot of future here. And so that's what gives me hope, is like just the beautiful energy of the young people, and the lessons from the elders. That gives me hope. And yeah, we all get tired. I am really tired right now with everything that has gone on, but we uh we we just have to move a little bit at a time, not a lot. And if we just make little tiny shifts, all those little tiny shifts in the aggregate make a big shift. So that's what gives me hope, is that change doesn't have to be a big giant, uh, you know boom, I don't know, like heavy lift. It can be a teeny tiny little shift, but all of us together doing that teeny tiny little shift makes a huge difference. So that's what gives me hope. Oh, and I forgot. I just wanted to say, here is a here's my I talked about American Savoir, that exhibit. Well, it's also now a beautiful bilingual book that has lots of beautiful pictures of all the artists that we wrote about. And so I highly recommend it if you want to check it out from the library. Please check it out from the library. And if your library doesn't have it, maybe just request it from your library. And if your school doesn't have it, ask your school to get it. And if you want me to come and talk about it, I'll come and bring my friends who helped also co-wrote this book, and we'll have a real fun time. So